And we are now live streaming.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Done? Can you hear me?
We can.
Right, welcome everybody to the full council meeting, 24th February 2022. Welcome to the people on live stream, members of the public, staff and elected members. Councillor Hanford, would you like to do the council blessing, please?
Oh, there we go, Morena. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai mo ngā hāpore e mahina i mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua, kia tōtika tā mātou mahi. Mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri ka taia, te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Thank you. Apologies. No apologies. Item number 4, declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda, none. We'll go straight to item number 7, public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. We have 2 people. First, Jess Ward, principal of Paraparaumu Beach School, on the transport paper. And then we'll have Pat Dugan on the growth strategy. Can you let Jess in, please?
Your Worship, Jess is now in the meeting.
Jess, good morning to you. You have 3 minutes and then we'll have a short question time. So you can start now.
Your Worship, I'll just get her to be able to unmute. Jess, are you able to hear us now and able to speak now?
Yes, I can hear everyone. I don't know why my video is not working, but that's okay. Oh, yes, I can see. I usually need a child to help me with technology.
So Jess, you got 3 minutes and just about at 2 minutes, I'll just tell you to wind up and conclude, and then we'll have question time after that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Gurunathan, and thank you to the Mayor and esteemed councillors for allowing me to speak today. Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for the improvements that have been made to roads around our school in the last few months, with changes to our drop-off zone, electronic speed signs and repairs to footpaths. And we look forward to more improvements and traction on additional safety measures in the coming months and years. The reason why I wanted to speak with you today is to give you some reasons why particularly widening Grey Avenue is paramount for our community and our students. As you'll know, in pandemic times, health and safety is paramount. But when you work with young children, health and safety is paramount regardless of what else is going on. I've been associated with the school for a long time, nearly 30 years, not in this seat, thank goodness, because I wouldn't have survived. In that, in 30 years ago, we didn't have the built-up residential areas that we have now, and Grey Ave is just simply not fit for purpose anymore. We have multiple times during the day, at peak times when buses can't get through, they sideswipe cars. Kids have been known to be clipped on bicycles. And the congestion is just simply, it creates panic and anxiety. And I just feel that, the roading infrastructure, I know it's on the long-term plan to look at widening Grey Avenue, I think in 6 to 7 years' time, but I want to implore the council to look at bringing that forward. I know that team on the council have done lots of research around our school, lots of surveys, and the feeling that we are getting back, the voice that we're getting back is that the statistics say we're not at a high risk. And
You got 30 seconds to wind up.
thank you. And I feel that we are of high risk. It's just that my staff do an amazing job at mitigating that risk. You know, we do road education safety. We are out there vigilantly every day, making sure kids get to school safely. But it's not good enough just to say that we're doing a good job. We really implore the council to help us improve road safety for our students and our community.
And that is time.
Thank you very much. Questions, anybody?
We have Councillor Randall.
Yep, Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Jess. And as you know, myself and Kathy have been pushing for the widening of the Grey Avenue Street for some time. And it is going to be discussed this afternoon in our annual plan workshop. But to try and bring it forward to an earlier time period. But the point is that will be at a huge cost. And that could be, you know, we're trying to keep our rates down below 8%. So there's that balancing factor. But anyway, it will be discussed. Thank you. And it will be discussed this afternoon.
Councillor McCann.
Kia ora, Jess, and just so councillors are aware, I do have some vested interest in it. My wife works at that school. Can you tell us, Jess, is the role of the school likely to increase, or are you at maximum capacity? How is that growth looking for you?
Thanks, Rob. We are just under 600 students at the moment. When the road was fit for purpose, the school was around 220 students. We had no traffic issues. 600 students is huge. We're one of the biggest schools on the coast. And when Transmission Gully finally opens, we are pretty sure that we are going to be getting more young families to the coast, which will impact on schools up here.
So we're discussing our district plan, and one of the things is intensification, and there are areas around you that are significantly going to be intensified, hence more people. Are there other opportunities for where children can go to school here, or do you think that intensification is actually going to lead to more pupils at the school and more problems?
In the beach area, Parapara Uma Beach, there's only us and Kenakena. When we got to 730 students a few years ago, the ministry let us make our zone smaller, but that made Kenakena bigger. So we're both very, very full at the moment. I know Kenakena School has had some roading improvements. They've got a little bit more land around the roading around them. We are sandwiched in because we've got the golf course. So you can only get two sides of our school. So I can't imagine that it's going to improve.
Thanks, Jess.
Councillor Compton.
Kia ora, Jess. Thank you for speaking to us today. Unlike Rob, I don't have anyone at your school, but my boy goes to Kenakena around the corner, and we experience the fun of that every day on Arnold Grove, which is slightly wider than Grey Ave, but still, as being a cul-de-sac, ends up being a bit of a nightmare. In terms of the road widening, what sort of length of Grey Ave are you looking at getting widened to help mitigate things down there?
So the road narrows just south of the school. So from Martin Road right down to the pedestrian crossing, it's wide enough. From our school driveway right down to Eatwell Ave, it narrows. So that's the pressure point. especially when the buses come through, and the postie's doing his postal run at 8:30 when kids are crossing the road. So from our driveway to, I would say not as far as Eatwell Ave, but at least as far as the little bridge that goes over the stream.
Oh, yeah, just south of Calendar Terrace.
Yes, Eatwell Reserve would allow for better parking either side and buses to get through.
Cool, perfect. Because I'm literally, I've got Google Maps up here, so I'm just looking at sort of what the situation is, and there's obviously some decent berms on that eastern side of the road, isn't there?
Yeah.
For some widening to take place. Thank you. That's really helpful just to understand the sort of specific area on Grey Ave we're talking about. Thank you.
So, Jess, I remember when two of my kids went to your school, you have another entrance, isn't it, on the other road?
Yes, we have a back pathway off Martin Road. So we have a second pedestrian crossing on Martin Road, and about a third or maybe slightly less of the community use that back gateway. 2/3 would use Grey Ave gateway.
So can a combination of things be done at those two entrances and exits to mitigate this problem?
I think if Martin Road and Grey Avenue weren't bus routes, it would ease the problem. We did talk to the bus company at one stage about changing their bus timetable, but kids have to get to school, so that doesn't help. Martin Road is wide enough, but yeah, the pressure point is Grey Ave. Parents don't like parking on Martin Road because to get their kids all the way up the back path, particularly if they're littlies, is a bit of a trek.
Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, morning, Jess. Just a real quick question from me about the understanding you have of what proportion of the students at your school are travelling to school kind of using various different modes, like how many students are walking, what proportion of students are cycling to school, scootering, catching the bus, getting dropped by their parents, just a bit of a breakdown of how your students are getting to school each day.
Sure. It's seasonal.
Yeah.
When it's a really rubbish day, everyone wants to drop their child as close as they can get, and it's a nightmare. On a typical day when the weather's dry, we usually have about 300 kids, 250 to 300 kids will scooter to school. Probably about 20 or slightly more will cycle to school. And then we try to encourage parents for their kids to walk, a short distance. So drop them off in Guildford Drive, drop them off in Walton Road, and encourage them to walk a little bit to get rid of the congestion. And probably only 5 or 6 kids would come by bus.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah,
but no, a lot of parents also will, I don't know the percentage, but I would say 50% perhaps will drop their kids at school and drop them off with a scooter. So they'll get to school by being dropped off, but they'll have to scooter home.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And the road patrol that you mentioned that is run by the school, is that kind of something that happens every day, or?
Yeah. So because there's very few schools, I think, that still have 2 manned road patrol gates. And so, the police are fantastic at training up our students. And the students love the job. They love the responsibility. The changes to Grey Ave drop-off zone mean the kids can now have a much better view north on Grey Ave. But one of the catch points is my staff hate being on road patrol because they get abused by parents, and that's awful. Our Board of Trustees looked into staff wearing GoPros because they're fearful of being abused by traffic drivers.
Wow, thank you for providing that insight too. Yeah, cool. That's all from me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. One last question from Martin Holiday, then we've got to move on to the next. Martin.
Oh, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Jess, great to meet you. I'm the other ward councillor for Paraparimi. Thank you for a very informative speech. It's been quite good getting a few things covered off with regards to information. Quick question was, you talked to cars being clipped. Is this in relation to specific times of the day, i.e. sort of when cars getting picked up, kids getting picked up or dropped off, or is there a problem with parking down there through the whole day as such?
It's usually, I've only really heard of cars getting clipped at those peak times, so sort of between 8:30 and 9:30, and then again sort of between 2:45 and 3:30. We have had other car accidents, but I think they're one-offs, and it's typically cars being clipped. Sorry, typically cars being clipped by buses.
And that would be at peak times when there's lots of kids around as well, I would just talking to those time frames.
Yes.
Thank you. That's great, Jess.
Martin, is that your dog?
Yeah, we're dog sitting at the moment. We've got another one. I'll go back on mute.
Okay, Jess, thank you very much for taking the time and coming to speak to us on this very important issue.
Thank you, Mayor Gurunathan and councillors for hearing me out. And I really appreciate all the work that your team are doing to, in these COVID times, feel really reassured that you are doing the right thing and keeping us safe.
Well, thank you very much, and keep safe yourself and the whole school. Thank you. The next is Pat Duignan. Am I right? Duignan.
Yes, Your Worship. He has just popped into the meeting now, and I will just get him to unmute. Mr. Doynan, you should be able to speak now.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you very much. You're speaking on the growth strategy, particularly at Waikanae Beach. You've got 3 minutes, and then after that, we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks very much, councillors and Mr. Mayor. And first, let me say that
Mr. Doynan, you should be able to speak now.
In the discussion,
Can you hear me?
yes, I
Just
can
need to
hear you.
just need to turn off your live stream, Mr. Doynan.
Yes, I'll just do. I've done that. Sorry, I have you on the live stream on my iPad is next to me. First, I'd just like to very briefly say I appreciate the conversations I've had with the staff prior to this, and very much appreciate their cooperation. So I've given you, and the staff have kindly distributed a note. I'm not going to go through that verbatim. I'm going to focus upon Waikanae Beach, but the comments also have a wider relevance. The proposed growth strategy, cutting the quick, would allow 4-storey buildings and commercial activity in the Waikanae Beach local centre and on sections within 200 metres of that. It's based on the requirement in the Resource Management Act for the council to consider what is commensurate with the level of commercial activity and community service in a local centre. The Waikanae Beach local centre is about as small as you can imagine. It's 3 buildings, a dairy, a small bakery, very famous bakery, but small, and a takeaway fish and chip shop. And so this becomes 4 stories, as does the area around it. Now, the point about that is that that is not actually commensurate with the level of activity. Now, I know that this is forward-looking, but all the same, it sort of postulates a radical change to the area. I realise that the 4-storey concept is, in a sense, in the context that the medium-term density residential standard, sorry, not medium-term, the medium density residential standard is anticipated in the growth strategy to be applied to Waikanae Beach as a whole. That's 3 stories, so you kind of end up with 4 stories in the local centre. Well then, the biggest issue is whether you in fact are required to apply the MDRS to Waikanae Beach. And it may come as a surprise to those of you who have been following this closely, as I imagine councillors have, that there is an exemption. That exemption is that an area
That is time, Mr. Doingen.
Yeah, okay, well, I've just briefly indicated that there's a law here, there's a provision for an exemption, and that I would just ask that I understand why the staff have legal advice about that exemption. I think it would be very useful if that legal advice was available to the public.
Right, Peg, in the Waikanae Beach area, am I right that is part of a local outcomes plan that informs the district plan?
Yes, well, in the district plan, we have a special area within Waikanae Beach, which is got a beach residential zone. That would be swept away as part of the implied by the growth strategy, that special area.
Would you see that creation of that particular zone through a consultation process to be effectively a contract, if you like, between council and that community?
Well, you have already sort of designated it as a special area. What is now happening is that it's being wiped out as a special area because of the law that the central government passed. Your submission to the select committee on that quite rightly pointed out how detrimental this was. I'm pointing out that there is provision for an exception and that you could apply that to the beach areas. That would actually help in a particular problem you have, which is how to deal with the coastal issues and the process you have Jim Bolger working on, how to deal with that, given that you've been told by central government by August, you must have a plan to allow 3 stories everywhere, including in principle along the coastal rim. And so I think that you should consider taking advantage of the exception in the Act. Now, I know staff will have taken legal advice, but I think that it's worth your while to have a close look at operating with that exemption to avoid, having the entire area of the beaches, Raumati, Otaki, everywhere, to have 3 stories, which is completely radically going to wipe out the special character that you have yourselves acknowledged and is in the district plan appendix 3.
Thank you, Pat. That's really good. Councillor Randall.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Pat, for your submissions. And what are you hoping that the council staff will address today? You're asking for the medium density. You're asking for an exemption from the medium density residential standards for Waikanae Beach, but the council wouldn't be able to give you that answer. Would you be asking them today to consider and receiving submissions as to why you could be or should be exempted?
Well, I would suggest that in the recommendation which the staff have drafted for your decision, that's the matter you're deciding on, that in it has several references to the MDRS being applied. So I think that a wording, and I'm sure the staff could provide you with this, which said subject in relevant areas to consideration of the exemption provided in the Act, that would be what you would want to build into your growth strategy decision, so that you had provision when you come to your strategy is not a statutory, it's not the application of the rezoning, but it is an indication as to how you're going to do it in the months that follow. So I think you should protect your decision-making power by referring to the exemption being available to you. And then when the time comes to apply all of this, which is going to be in a month's time or so, that you would then have the ability to say, well, we provided we would look at the exemption when the time came, as opposed to a wording in there now, which effectively kind of implies that you will just do the MDRS completely over the entire area of Kapiti, actually.
Right, thank you. That's very clear. Councillor Pravano.
Thank you, Pat, for coming along to talk to us. So I just want to sort of unpick and appreciate your submission and the work that you've done on this and behind the scenes. But I just want to clarify a couple of things, and I'm not necessarily looking at the screen because I'm looking at my other screen here. So there's two things going on here. One is the MDRS, which basically has been superimposed on this area as a T1 area and includes Waikanae Beach, okay? And that's for 3 stories, potentially subdivision of sections into 3 sections, and then building height of up to 3 metres. Now, on top of that, and just to clarify me if I've got this right, certain areas, some of the local centres, which includes Waikanae Beach, which includes the Timawana Road to Onio Street intersection, has been identified as one of these local centres where council is actually proposing that it can be up to 4 stories high and within 200 metres of that distance. So there's 2 things that are being imposed on Waikanae Beach here, which basically certainly flies in the face of the character nature of what has been decided at Waikanae Beach. And I have to say that I think Waikanae Beach is the only one that has actually been captured by this 4 story high building.
Your question, Councillor.
Yeah, so do you agree that there's 2 things going on here, Pat, and could potentially be twice as bad? Oh, your sound's off, sorry. Still sounds off. You still can't hear, Pat.
Be muted.
Can you unmute?
Try again now, because it was on unmute.
I think there we are, yes.
I think that might be a problem at Mr. Doinan's end because he is unmuted.
Yes. Yeah, so he's changed the settings somehow. We can't hear you, sorry, Pat.
Mr. Doinan, we still can't hear you. You are unmuted, so there may be something on your setting that's caused you to be muted.
The last time too, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, right, thanks. Sorry about that. Right, just to quickly answer the question, yes, there are 2 matters being covered here. The 4 stories for the local centre and the 3 stories MDRS. I linked the 2 because I can recognise that the staff see it as, if you're going to have 3 stories all around the local centre, then they sort of feel compelled by the structure of the Act and the obligations to come up with something higher again for the local centre. So that is why in my paper that I've given you, I've linked the 2 matters. But you are quite right that there are 2 separate decisions. But your staff will probably tell you that if you're going to have 3 stories around the local centre, you're kind of forced by logic, some logic of the Act to sort of allow 4 stories at the local centre. So I've focused in my comment earlier on the question of exempting the beach areas from the MDRS, because that kind of is the way that then frees you up to, not do anything radical about the local centres.
So, Councillor Brabham, you got another question? Because I want to move on to.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So, Pat, have you any idea why that particular location is chosen as opposed to right on to Terry Street?
It's purely historic. It's purely that it was, somebody built a dairy there way back, and then when the zoning was sort of implemented, there was a commercial business there, and it got called a local centre. It's never been reconsidered because it's just there. So up to now, it's not had any significance other than allowing the commercial activities to have security. But what has happened is that the central government has seized upon the concept of local centres and wanted them sort of the focus of even more intensification than anywhere else. So,
right, I'm going to move on
horse
to
by our own petard. I understand, Mayor. Thank you very much. The papers I've given you.
But I'm just
So
going to
one
move on
further
to
question
one
in
more
relation to
Hold
around
on.
Onio Street. Are there only? It's my calculation is there actually only 3 commercial shops there.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, the answer, this question is answered. Councillor Compton.
Thank you, Pat, for speaking to us today. And I'm just referring to your letter to councillors. I sort of noticed that you focus just on the commercial aspects of stuff that's within 200 metres of that local centre in terms of the district growth strategy. But you seem to have admitted that there's a medical centre, a tennis club, a community hall, a church, and a bowls club also within 200 metres or cooey of that. Why did you omit those? Because they're community services and facilities that are included in that, within cooey of that local centre.
Well, they don't. I agree that they are activities there, but then there are tennis courts down at Terry Road, and there's halls in various other places. The local centre is kind of, as conceived in the Act, is about commercial and retail activities. So I don't disagree with you. The medical centre in your noting, but I don't think it changes the context. The medical centre is there. It doesn't need to be in any change in the zoning. It's there and already, and it was allowed, and that's fine. I mean, the issues other people don't like, but that's not relevant as I see it. It is true that I suppose it is just one activity that's sort of slightly different from pure residential, but I don't think it has a particular driving rationale to say, let's go to 4 stories. It's only 2 stories and wouldn't probably be going higher.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. A follow-up question. You make an argument, and again, I'm referring back to your letter here about saying that council has a sound basis for determining that we do not intend Waikanae Beach to be predominantly urban in character and part of a housing and labour market of at least 10,000 people. I mean, isn't that sort of living in denial of the reality? Waikanae Beach is fundamentally part of, at a minimum, the wider Waikanae labour market and housing market, and part of the wider sort of Kapiti Coast one, when you look at Paraparaumu and Waikanae as that larger urban area. I'm just trying to understand your rationale as to why other areas like Waikanae Township, like Kinakina, like Raumati, why they would have to take additional growth, and Waikanae Beach somehow is exempt from taking its fair share of growth as well. Why do you get to preserve your community in amber while other people have to change?
Well, I don't think we're preserving it in amber, but Appendix 3 of the district plan, your plan, the existing one, has this section which is an expert report that you have integrated into the plan, and it enunciates, as I've got it at the end of my note, a very clear statement that the beach areas are different and that they play an important role in the entire Wellington area as beach areas, and that they have a special character. Now, the Select Committee actually did allow for special characters, and that is another avenue that you could avail yourself of, which would indicate that you treat it differently. I don't see it as preserving an amber. I see it, though, as avoiding having Kapiti look like Miami or like the Gold Coast. And I mean, you are in danger of finding that you lose that because you're going to have 3 stories everywhere, that you lose the battle that you are waging to protect the coastal rim from development that would have 3 stories literally on the beach. Well, on the rim there. So,
if I can just jump in there for a second.
Interest.
No, hang on a moment. Councillor Compton, I don't want this to become a debate.
No, okay. Sure.
I do have a question. Yep. Your worship, if I may. Pat, have you seen photos of Miami and the Gold Coast lately? And you realise I've got buildings much larger than 3 stories, which is well beyond what's proposed under the Housing Supply Enablement Act, and in terms of the 4 stories at the town centre. I mean, that would seem. Would you accept that accusing this of creating Gold Coast or Miami up here in Kapiti might be stretching the truth somewhat?
I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm urging you that you and ourselves and the Waitanai Beach Residents Association have a common interest in keeping the areas of Kapiti that are highly valued for their special characteristics, which you did agree to just 18 months ago in implementing a special character area. So I'm on your side, as your documents suggest from what you have just done. But I mean,
thank you.
My side is on ensuring people can afford housing.
Hold on. This is what I'm scared of. This goes into trench battle.
Sure.
Moving on to the next question of Councillor McCann.
Kia ora. Hey, thank you very much for coming to chat to us, and that was an interesting discussion about Miami. I understand, and there is a question in here, Mr. Mayor, that we did pass that special character document, and I remember saying that this seemed to not actually link in with the direction we're going. You're aware that the government has changed the direction, and that the opposition have agreed that really housing is a right. So how, when you're proposing to protect your region from the changes, would that not mean that every other small part of our community that can define itself somehow would not put their hand up and say, well, me too, we don't want this growth in our area because we want to protect our current houses and the way things currently are? How would you stop that from occurring?
Well, you have discretion over the application of this special exemption that the Act provides, and you've got a paper from the Ministry of the Environment about it. I mean, I think that there is a distinction. I mean, you already make it between the beaches and the commercial centres, and they each have their role, meaning coastlands, for example. So I think that there is certainly distinctions to be made. I mean, if you apply complete uniformity across the Kapiti district, you will get, you obliterate part of the district's character at the beaches. I think also from areas such as flooding and so on, the beaches clearly differ. There's no worry about tsunamis in coastlands, whereas there is, at the areas that we're talking about, they flood. That's just one characteristic where they differ. So it's not uniformity, cannot be the be all and end all. And sure, you would get other arguments, but you will exempt Te Horo, you will exempt the rural areas, some of which would technically fall. The Ministry of Environment paper envisages, you will apply it to exempt Paikokariki, incidentally, whereas actually your growth document treats Paikokariki as being exempt for other reasons, namely because of the lack of a sewage system and water reticulation.
Thank you,
yeah,
Pat.
Sure, sure.
Councillor Pravanov, I'm going to give you one question, short question, and then I need to move on.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, Pat. This is my question. Do you realise that within 200 metres of Onio Street, that then takes you into rural, general rural zone land, which is not urban land?
Going particular, in the particular direction of the motorway. Well, I agree. I suspect, though, that sort of the planners would say, well, that's not, I mean, they're 200 metres as drawn on the plans, just to give credit where it's due to them. They do the 200 metres, they apply it in a way that it does just represent urban sections rather than other areas. So
Yeah,
I think technically they get it right. Thank you.
Blob, really.
Okay, thank you very much. Pat,
you.
before you go,
Okay.
this is the question that I'm going to ask you. If the council proceeds this way, do you think you have the ability, when the time comes, when consent applications are made, for you to challenge this, given the argument that you've raised?
Your growth strategy does not, I mean, you're asking me a question, could we legally challenge you? Fair enough. The answer is yes, in the sense that the decision you're making today, however you word it, is not binding in any sense on what a person could react, or how they could react to the actual implementation when the time comes.
Because it's a strategy, not a, yeah.
Yes. The staff, but I do think you owe it to yourselves to preserve your freedom of action rather than to, tie yourself to a strategy. And there's no discussion of the MDRS there. It's just said in a couple of key places as a kind of assumed outcome. So for the moment, all I'm advocating is that you put a qualifier there subject to, other considerations regarding the Act or whatever wording the staff come up with to preserve your freedom of action. Okay. And I think that's your interest, is leaving us. It doesn't open you to more litigation. It just gives you the freedom of action. So you have the ability to do what you want.
Thank you, Pat, for taking the time engaging with us. It's been very interesting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I really appreciate the way you do this.
Your Worship, you have Kirsten Harpeter that would like to ask a question.
Oh, yes. Kirsten.
Oh, kia ora. Is Pat still online with us?
Yes.
Oh, kia ora, Pat. I'm Kirsten. I'm from Ngā Hapu Otaki. And I just wanted to let you know, I just wanted to thank you for bringing your issue to us today and your recommendation. And to let you know that we share the same concerns for the Otaki Beach area, and we will be asking the same of ourselves today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And that's another consideration, that I think the council should preserve your course of action as indicated for Otaki Beach.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you very much indeed. Much pleased to have the opportunity. Really appreciate it. And the staff.
We're now on to item 8. Do staff have a response to the public speaking time issues on both on the Jess votes on the traffic bylaws and Pat's one? Sean.
If I'm correct, I don't think Sean's in the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, we will come back to you later during those papers. If there's any relevant matters, staff can talk to them during the papers.
Okay. Right. Item 8B, leave of absence. No. On to C, matters of urgent nature. I have not been given any indication. Item 9, there's no report. We're now going into item 10, reports. The first report is proposed transport bylaw. And we have Suzanne, Rashmir, and Sean.
Kia ora. So I just want to briefly introduce the report. So as I'm sure you're probably aware by now, the transport bylaw has been proposed to set requirements for parking and the control of vehicle or other traffic on our roads and in our public places. We brought obviously the draft to you quite some time ago and undertook a consultation exercise which ended earlier last year, followed by a number of hearings held on the 25th of November. We had 8 submitters that were wanting to be heard and came along to the hearing. In terms of the consultation itself, we sought specific responses on sort of 3 areas of change in the bylaw. One was to do with residence and business parking, one to do with heavy motor vehicles, and then the other special lanes. And obviously there was also the opportunity to have a say on the wider bylaw itself. In terms of those sort of 3 specific areas that we talked about, most of the submissions were in support in terms of the feedback that we received, and then there was sort of a varying level of interest in other parts of the bylaw. So through this report, what I've sought to do is to identify, what responses came back in terms of the submissions that we received, and what we were sort of proposing in response to those submissions. So that's why there's quite a few appendices on here, just so that there's absolutely clarity for people as to what's been done with what they've submitted on. Yeah, I'd just like to take the rest of the report as read and invite any questions you may have.
Councillor Rendell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Suzanne. Before I start, I want to thank you for listening to the community, particularly around clause 7.3, which you modified, and you received detailed submissions from the Waikanae Beach people about that, and you did make a slight change to it. Would you agree with me that generally staff should listen to the community and not be too far ahead of the community's wishes? In other words, you may have a bit...
Mr. Rendell, I think that's not really an appropriate question to ask. I mean, we expect staff to be doing that anyway.
Oh, okay. Well,
have you got a question?
I'll terminate my... Thank you very much for modifying clause 7.3.
Thank you.
Right. The next is Councillor Coates.
Morena, Suzanne, good to see you, and thanks for all the work that you've done on this bylaw.
Thank you.
We had a gentleman come in and speak in the hearings with regards to heavy vehicles, trucks, etc. I think in Aihakia Street from memory, and I can't remember the specific details of that in terms of the timeframes and so forth. What was the staff's view in terms of the issues raised there, and was there any tweaks made to the proposed bylaw in response to that, or do you feel that they were adequately addressed already?
I felt that they were adequately addressed. I think what I've said in response to that submission was that anything that we do in terms of that heavy vehicle parking and placing restrictions would have to go through a resolution of council, and you have to publish that 4 weeks before and go through that process. So I think that from my perspective, I felt it was adequately covered through that process. The bylaw didn't set that in place. It allowed it to be set in place via a future resolution of council. So I felt that it was sufficiently covered, and I think that we're getting you know, we were getting a lot of complaints around that sort of, you know, that issue around heavy vehicle parking. And there's also rules in the district plan that kind of back that up for particularly residential areas as well. So I think, you know, there may be some places where it's appropriate, but that should be, you know, considered through a proper process, which the bylaw allows us to do.
Thank you. And depending on the decision today with the bylaw, how is that communicated back to the submitter?
So what I've tried to do in one of the appendices is to say this is the submissions that were received and this is what I recommend in response to those submissions. So I think Appendix 3 of the report kind of went through that. So you know, that we can sort of, you know, make sure that it's obviously published through the agenda, but presumably we've also got the need to sort of publish the fact that this is adopted if it is. So we can actually say, you know, that we've taken on board, and if you want to have a look, we can see, you know, you can see the responses to your submissions through the appendix to this report.
Yeah, great. I just think it's good that we've got that on the live stream as well, that they've been considered in the responses as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Suzanne, for all the work that you've done on this, and you know, hopefully, well, I think it will end up, you know, with a few tweaks that have been made, being a much more workable bylaw. But I have about 4 questions, and my first one is probably more of an admin one. So both the document on the hub as well as the one on the website has the list of all the submitters' cell phone numbers and their email addresses. And I'm just wondering whether that's actually breaching their privacy.
I think we said when we actually went out with the consultation that you know, if they wanted to be specifically retracted, we could. I think we can remove them. I don't see that there's no need for them to be there, but we did go through so that sort of privacy thing. But I certainly will get those removed before it goes out on the website.
So what you're saying is that was deliberate. That was deliberate to leave them there, was it?
I don't think it was deliberate.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think, you know, yeah.
We did ask the question about privacy. It wasn't deliberate that they were in, but we will.
What's the next question, Councillor Pravanov?
Yes. Okay, so in the main document, there's a lot of conversations around parking on booms and you know, where people can park and where people can't park. Yeah. And as I said, the word boom is used an awful lot, but when it comes to the document and the definitions, the word boom is not actually used under the road margin. And I'm just wondering whether that, you know, I think, you know, maybe that needs to be clarified so that people can understand, you know, the use of that terminology within the main document. You know, I know it's you know, that it's the bylaw that is the final result, but when you're actually going through the thought processes and you're using a set of words which basically is only used once that I could see in that bylaw, you know, it's probably not, it probably could be, I think it would be better if it was actually used in the definition. And I'm not actually 100% certain what the word boom actually means anyway.
Well, I can certainly do that. In terms of road margin, it says any grass or netted area immediately adjoining the carriageway.
So where does it say that?
Under road margin.
Yeah, so I don't think the word boom is mentioned, is it?
No, but we can certainly say, you know, including the berm if you'd like to have that clarified.
So where is the berm? Is that where is actually the berm?
The grass area that adjoins the carriageway.
Okay, so it's basically between. So what about the curb and channel? The curb and channel is separate. Then you've got the grass area, which is the berm, and then you've got potentially a footpath. Yeah,
so parking on footpath is actually covered by
yes, yeah.
Anyway. But you know, we can put you know, i.e. berms in B and C if you think that would be helpful from a point.
So I suppose the other area that isn't mentioned is between the footpath and someone's fence line. Is that actually a berm as well or not? What is that? What's that designated as?
Yeah, that would be the grass area.
Is that a berm as well? Because I suppose because people park where they can fit, and sometimes it's between the fence or the boundary of the property and the footpath, and sometimes between the footpath and the curb.
So, Councillor, I think you raised a really good point, but I'm sure staff can clarify that further offline.
Yeah, well, I suppose.
Yeah, your next question.
Without having that definition, we don't actually know
right.
what we're agreeing to today.
You're right. You're right.
So B and C cover that, and I can just put in, including the berm if that's helpful. And I can do that. That's no problem.
Okay. So my next question is on page 49. Actually, no, I can't remember what it was 49, but there's somewhere in there it talks about when we may or may not. I think actually it's a case of where the fines are in place, but we may or may not actually issue them.
Yeah, so under section 32.1, council may grant a dispensation to any person or business from full compliance with provision in any case where council's of the opinion that full compliance would needlessly or injuriously affects that person or business without corresponding public benefit. So under 32, I think that captures that. I'm just looking to clarify that, but that is covered under 32.1 of the bylaw.
So then there's, I suppose the question is then how is this going to be, so actually no, my other part of that is too that if you go to section 13.1, it says, oh no, actually no, it's not 13.1, it's, there's another section in there which basically said that if you're breaching the bylaw, you will be fined. So there's a disparity between you may do and you will do. And then I suppose on top of that, how is all this actually going to be monitored? Because that's the key to this. And if you can't monitor it, then there's probably no point having this in place.
I guess that could be said for any bylaw that we've got in place. Certainly this is no different to the way we've worked the last sort of 12 years with the 2010 bylaw. We've got the ability to fine. Sometimes that doesn't happen, or people have the right to be able to to question that fine, and that's generally down to officer discretion. In terms of monitoring, then all the offences that we have are monitored through our system, so that they are monitored. But that's certainly no different to what's happened the last sort of 10 years.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I know I've raised that before. And I suppose someone who's got a compliance background, 101 is that you don't actually impose any rules that you can't actually enforce. That's the bottom line. That's fine.
Yeah.
So, and now my last question is in relation to 13.1. It talks about a person in charge, and I think this is in relation to parking in the wrong place. And I'm just wondering whether that person in charge relates to the person who parked there or the owner of the vehicle.
I'm just looking sideways for
the fine goes to the person who's the owner.
Okay.
And it's up to the.
Okay, so the fine goes to the owner, but it's down to them then. I guess it would be the same with the speeding ticket. The fine goes to the owner, and then it's down to them to say, well, actually, it wasn't me that was driving. It was my brother or sister or whatever.
So, would it be better to maybe change that wording then? To be very clear about who actually is.
Well, I guess not, because it's the person in charge that's done that's actually committed the offence rather than necessarily the owner. So I think a person in charge probably sits better. And again, that's wording that's in our current bylaw and has worked for the last 12 years. So so I'm kind of keen not to make changes that don't necessarily help in terms of the enforcement side of things.
Yeah. Well, I know that when a person gets a ticket or loses demerit points, they're actually caught themselves rather than identifying just the number plate in the vehicle. So there is quite a big difference.
Well, I don't know. I think the fine, if it's caught on a static camera, then the fine would go to the owner, then it's down to them to identify, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and I don't think demerit points.
Right. Okay, moving along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin Holiday.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, sorry, I'm going to talk a little bit about 7.3, but not much. I just wanted to clarify in the end document 73 says no person shall park on any road margin, including grass berm, verge, curb, lawn, garden, or reserve without due care. So just checking, is there something that you can park on berms as long as there's due care? Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. In the submissions that came in, people did talk to curbed or formed pathways. If there's not a formed pathway there, fundamentally, are you saying you can park there as long as park there as long as there is due care? Is that right?
Yeah, and that's why we sought to define what due care means, so that you know, there's some sort of clarity around what that relates to. And so, you know, we have got circumstances where, you know, that even if there isn't curb and channel, they are creating, you know, damage, which we obviously want to address, or they may be parked over services that we need to get access to. So what we've sought to do with 7.5 is to give some teeth to you know, the ability to enforce by providing some clarity around what's acceptable and what might not be.
So would it be fair to say that there'll be officer discretion in that area?
Yes, as it has been with the last bylaw. Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, that's all I wanted to check on that. The other thing was just it's just a grammatical thing, to be honest. Where are we? Page 21, number 20 on page 108.
108. Oh, it'll be on the agenda.
Page 108. It's just 31.3. I just 31.2, 1.3. Look, just the second to last, third to last line, if you like, it says, and to the penalties are set out by the registration of council and identified in a relevant schedule to the comma or in section 242 of the Local Government Act. Just didn't quite read right. I just thought.
I think it meant to say to the bylaw.
That's cool. I was just bringing it to the attention. I know there's little amendments being made there as well. I did note that the fine is quite high there. It links to a $20,000 fine. I was wondering whether that's even necessarily needed to be there. If you're looking at that, is that if you actually go to the section 242 in the Local Government Act, it's actually got a set there of various fines and also imprisonment there as well. So it's not just a fine. So I just wondering if you just refer, if there's just a need to refer that, or not necessarily scare the seven jeebus out of people with a $20,000 fine. But perhaps that can just be taken into consideration looking at the a small editorial amendment.
So you're seeking that we just remove that last part after the comma of that sentence?
Yeah, if
just leave it at
Deputy Mayor agree with regard to that when they're doing that. Just as liable to conviction to a fine not exceeding $20,000. There's actually a selection of fines there, and they're all available in that section that you do refer to, 242.
Yep.
That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. That brings the questions to an end. Councillor Coates has signaled that he'd like to move the recommendations 75 to 76. And can I have a seconder? Martin Holiday, seconder. Councillor Coates, right of intro.
Thank you, Worship. Look, as I said earlier, Suzanne and as other elected members have said, well done to the work that you and the team have done on this bylaw. We've received a number of submissions. I think it's fair to say that the elected members and the staff have taken that feedback on board and made the appropriate changes. And the bylaw that we see here is a good reflection of that, provides some balance. I think it's important to note that we have a number of bylaws across our whole district, and you know, the example that I use most often is signage, where there'll be lots of signage around the district that doesn't necessarily comply to the bylaw. That doesn't mean that council actively goes out looking for every single piece of that and removes it or fines people, but it does mean that it has the discretion that if there is a complaint about a offending piece of signage, that they have the ability to do so. And this transport bylaw is no different. It simply provides the mechanism for council staff to act if there is an issue that causes concern. So I think we've struck the right balance. And I think it's important, my comments just around going back to those submitters that did provide through the hearings, the responses and so forth. So I thank you, Suzanne, for the work that you and your team have done. and happy to support this and look for my fellow colleagues' support in adopting this bylaw.
Right. Open to debate. Anybody? Councillor Compton.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. I want to sort of follow on from what Councillor Coots was saying, acknowledge the work that staff have done in putting this together, but especially in one particular pain point, which Councillor Randall brought up, which was that issue around parking on berms and making the bylaw or writing the new bylaw in such a way that actually I think is a lot more practical, especially when you consider a lot of the areas that we have where there isn't adequate on-road parking in any sort of reasonable distance of people's houses or recreation areas. And I think what's been put in there, it includes, there's enough there to make sure that people aren't allowed to park in such a way that they're actually going to cause issues. But there's enough there to ensure that if they're parking responsibly and they're not damaging things or not obstructing things, then they are still able to use berms for parking, which could be very valuable given the changes to minimum parking requirements and the like coming up. Though by the time that construction gets underway, I imagine we'll probably be due to review all this anyway down the track. So yeah, just want to acknowledge staff for including that. I know that's been a pain point that's been brought up not only in the submissions, but I've heard about it from members of the community after this as well. So it's really good to see that reflected here.
Right, thank you. Councillor Holiday.
I guess in a similar vein, endorsing both Councillor Compton's and Councillor Coots' comments, I just wanted to also add to that. I was very interested to see the addition of the resolution or council resolution mechanism with regards to addressing what could potentially be small changes that are required or updates that are required, rather than the need for going into a consultation process as such. I think that's obviously we want consultation for major things, but it becomes a little bit awkward trying to do it for small changes that, as this shakes out, if you like, may turn up. So I just wanted to comment on that and bring awareness to that, because I think it was quite important. And thank you very much for the work that's been done on this.
Right. Doesn't seem to be anybody else. So the recommendation for 75 and 76 moved by Councillor Coote, seconded by Councillor Holiday. All those in favour, raise your hands.
Tick.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can we just
tick.
have the, yeah.
You got a tick on, yes, right.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have 11 votes in favour.
Right, it's carried. Thank you very much. So
Thank
can
you.
we take a 5-minute break? Back 9:45. I mean 10:45.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I just to clarify now? Somebody's put a cross, and I just want to make sure that that was just that was in error. Can everybody? That was Councillor Elliott. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Everybody can remove theirs now.
So does that mean we've got 10 in one?
Councillor Elliott, can you just confirm? Oh no, it's a tick now. That's fine. We have 11 in favour and carried.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody.